Let's find out what are the ugliest miniatures in Warhammer history. And the video is sponsored by Audible. Yay! Hey everyone, you're watching Squidmar Miniatures, and I'm out here taking a walk in the woods, listening to an audiobook called The Harvest, about Warhammer of course. And the main reason why I'm out here today, well, there's actually a couple of them. For one, I've been in the basement pretty much the last month, and it's really good weather, so I wanted to get out and catch some sun, and even though we have a lot of snow still here. The second one is they are building a school in this area, so they've started tearing up a bunch of trees, and I wanted to grasp that opportunity to get some basic materials and roots. But what I really wanted to talk about, and kind of why I came up with the idea of this video, was because the last couple of weeks Games Workshop have been blasting us with news about the new High Elves, or the Lumineth Realm Lords as they're called. And even though I like some of them a lot, some of the designs are amazing, I think that some of them have sparked somewhat of a meme storm on the internet. And even though these aren't the ugliest miniatures Games Workshop ever released, it got me thinking, what are the ugliest miniatures in Games Workshop's history? When talking about ugly miniatures, the first thing that always comes to my mind is the thing that's closest to my heart. And the box that I opened is the first box of miniatures that I ever purchased. It was all Wood Elves, namely Archers first, and I got almost all of the Wood Elf miniatures from the mid-90s. Except for one, Ariel. I'm not exactly sure how the lore works, but she was like the queen of the Wood Elves, but the sculpt was the ugliest piece of miniature that was available back then. And yeah, Wood Elf had some of the coolest miniatures that was available back then. You have the Way Watchers, you had the cool Dryads, the Tree Lords, you had Orion, he was like the coolest mini ever. And then there was Ariel, and yeah, I had to complete my collection when I got back into Warhammer, but this is not the prettiest miniature you're ever gonna see. There's just something about the pose, the face, the hair, the hand, and yeah, the proportions are just off, and the wings, yeah, it's kind of a hard pass. I still love the model, but it's quite ugly. Don't mind me doing this, I'm just building my new cosplay helmet. And blasting 40,000 years into the future, the Tyranids haven't always shown their best side to us. All the way back to 1987 and Rogue Trader, the Tyranids were some of the weirdest sculpts you're ever going to see. Just look at these amazingly funky Tyranid Warriors. If this isn't on the top list of the weirdest Games Workshop sculpts ever, I don't know what is. And you know what? This is not all. Games Workshop has given us hot babes such as the Carnifex, or Screamer Killer as it was called, or maybe even better, the prototype for the Tyranids called the Dominator. These are special, to say the least. And yet to this date, Games Workshop have not given up on making ugly Tyranid models. They actually sell some of them still on their website. Just take a look at this Biowar, for example. I don't know what's going on with this face, but it ain't pretty. Lumineth cosplay is almost done. So let's not strive too far away from our current theme with space monsters being funky. Today the Gene Stealers have some of the coolest Warhammer 40k miniatures you can have. Not as cool as Orks, obviously, but I mean, come on, take a look at this, isn't this awesome? But again, travel back to the late 80s and things weren't always as pretty. Just take a look at the first version of the Patriarch and Magus, and what, I mean, come on guys, what the heck happened to this dude's face? Or the hands, or the mouth, or, I mean, the whole mini is just, I don't know. I don't want to be too mean, but this is not the prettiest miniature in the Games Workshop history. And by the way, speaking of that cool army, I mean the orcs that we talked about, aren't orcs always the best? I mean, the first generation orcs looked amazing. These are the coolest sculpts from the first generation, but we do have an outlier, an exception to this rule, and that is the orc cheerleader for the specialist game Blood Bowl. Who the hell decided to drop this sculpt on its head on the floor before sending it to casting? And I don't even know if that's the biggest problem. Whose fault was it? Steve? Always Steve. God damn it, Steve. I think my Lumineth Realm Lord cosplay helmet is done. Isn't it pretty? It was quick, took like 2 minutes, ready to go. But you know, 88 was not the best year ever. 1987 on the other hand, probably the best year ever. Some people were born that year. I don't know what else happened in 87, but Rogue Trader, for example, was released. And in many ways, Rogue Trader seemed to be the heart and soul of ugly miniatures in the Games Workshop history. A lot has happened with miniature sculpting since then. And if you look at, for example, Warhammer 40k, the Warhammer Dreadnoughts are these amazing sculpts, and all the way back from 1987, a lot of things have happened, because back in 1987, this is how the Dreadnought looked, and yeah, it's probably one of the ugliest robot machinery miniatures I've ever seen. Again, it feels a bit weird sitting here complaining about Games Workshop that makes some of the most pretty miniatures ever, but I really feel like they dropped the ball with this sculpt. It's not the best one, but then again, it's also better than what they did with like some of the early start collecting boxes, where all the big machinery was pretty much cardboard boxes. And yeah, an ugly mini is better than that, I guess. And you know, we're almost done with Rogue Trader, but I have one more that I want to cover. And one of the things that I feel is lacking a lot in these games are really cool female characters. Luckily, we've been getting more of those lately. And Games Workshop did have female strong characters. Back in 1988, they did have this pack of sets called Adventurers. I think these were for Rogue Trader as well. And in this set, they didn't just have one female Space Marine, they actually had 2 female Space Marines called Gabs and Jayne. But these miniatures, the problem is that the sculpts are terrible. You can't paint these pretty even if you tried. I'm sorry, but this is not what I expected when I asked for female miniatures. But the funny thing with a lot of these ugly miniatures is that I still kind of want them. And speaking of hats, pretty ones, did you think I'd forget about the high hat himself, Nagash? Again, relating back to myself, I think I was 13 when I got my Orion, and around the same time, one of the friends that I used to play with back then got Nagash, and I thought he was so gosh darn cool. This was like the coolest miniature you could have, the Lord of the Undead. I really wanted him. And truth be told, to this date, I still kind of think that the old metal Nagash still looks good, but in reality I understand that it's 99% nostalgia and 1% truth. And to be honest, when I started writing for this video episode, I was kind of peer pressured when I asked everyone what the ugliest Games Workshop miniatures were, since everyone else said Nagash. So here he is, old Nagash. And by the way guys, I kind of sold my soul to this week's sponsor, Audible. Jokes aside, I'm extremely grateful that this week's video is sponsored by Audible. It's a service that I use myself, and as often as I can when I paint, I like to listen to audiobooks. Lately I've been listening to a Warhammer horror story called Dark Harvest by Josh Reynolds. It's a story about a deserted Sigmarite priest called Haran Blackwood who likes to use his fist more than preaching. And I know a lot of old Warhammer players complained about the new Age of Sigmar lore being too high fantasy and you don't get the feeling of the cities and the people living in these old medieval towns. And I think this book delivers exactly that. It's a book that's just grim and raw from page 1. It shows a dark side even from the Order factions. On top of having awesome audiobooks about Warhammer, Audible have one of the world's biggest audio libraries for podcasts, news, wellness programs, or what have you. You can join Audible now on audible.com/Squidmar or text Squidmar to 500 500. If you join now, you get 30 free days, and on top of that, every month you get 1 credit where you can select 1 audiobook and unlimited access to each month's selection of Audible originals. God damn it, this list of ugly minis is still a long mother. So let's do a speed round. The Nurgle Demon Prince. Seriously guys, this one is still sold on Games Workshop website. The Tyranid Red Terror, well, not much prettier. Going back to Tyranids again, they have really been good at showing their ugliest face for us. Another one of these pretty boys is Epidemus, and yeah, he looks more like a sponge than an actual demon lord. The Razor Gores, this might not be the ugliest dog ever, if we go back to the old peeing stance dog that existed a few years back, but the Razor Gore is still being sold. It's still a model that people like to bring to their games, and it's just really bad. I'm sorry whoever sculpted it. I don't hate you, you probably made 100 good minis, but this was not your best work. This is not Games Workshop, but actually Necromunda. Thetis 23-2, Weirdlock Bounty Hunter. This one as well was just re-released by Forge World, and I was shocked. This is a special miniature, probably holds a special place in many people's hearts. And among still existing miniatures, the Khorne Berserkers, still existing, and they probably looked cool 20 years ago, but Games Workshop, it's time to update this miniature. And the same goes for the Cathakan Jungle Fighters. My god, these faces are pretty. And speaking of pretty faces, the Dark Elf Dragon. What? 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 Why? And well, as you all know, there's so many miniatures out there. Games Workshop have probably released thousands upon thousands different sculpts, and all can't be good. We just scratched the surface. And sometimes, relating back to the last 2 miniatures that I showed, no matter how pretty the armor is, no matter how pretty the weapon is, a weird face can really hinder a model's look. The old Sisters of Battle Dialogus looks more like a miniatures from an adult catalog product for your deepest religious fantasies than awesome badass warrior space marine. Hey, I'm not judging if that's what you're into, but hey, I mean, come on, compare it to the new one and the old one. Which one do you prefer? And again, more pretty faces. The Mordheim Town Crier, Elrond and Gil-galad from Lord of the Rings game. They all pretty much look like something from an adult catalog if you look at their face. And then we have the Fiends of Slaanesh. Maybe that's not just the face though, I don't know. But you know what, let's end on a positive note. There are these sculpts that didn't age well, but still look lovely and fantastic, and so much have happened since the 1985 Lord of the Rings Treebeard. And isn't it fantastic how much have happened if you compare the old Tree Lord to the new one that still is a few years old, but there's probably about 30 years apart, and yeah, I still love the derpiness of the old one. So guys, with that all said, no hate to the sculptors. These are fantastic minis in so many ways, even though they are not the best looking ones. But I love to hear which ones are your favorite ugly miniatures from Games Workshop. I only own 2 of these ones on the list. It's the Town Crier and Ariel. Hopefully down the line I can pick up more of these old ones. Especially want to have some of the old like Space Marine girls and the Orc Cheerleader. So guys, with that said, I hope you had a great time. I most certainly had a good time making this video. So guys, smash the like button just as hard as you would smash all of these minis into your collection. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because every week I release videos about miniatures and miniature painting and hobby stuff. And guys, if you're interested in this week's sponsor, Audible, don't forget to go into audible.com/Squidmar or text Squidmar to 500 500 for 33 days of Audible. If you want to support this channel, you can either go to my website and check out all of the products that I use in the videos where I paint or record with, and if you follow any of those links, they go to Amazon, and Amazon kicks a little bit of money back to the channel. If you want to support me even more, you can do that via Patreon, donating a few dollars every month. Help me run this channel. It's been especially important right now with all the AdSense and all of the affiliate links dropping their rates to the content creators. So I'm super thankful for all of the 360 patrons that I have right now who's been helping me out to run this channel. It's pretty much the main reason these months why I can still keep doing these. A massive shout out to my top Patreon supporters: Joshua Crowther, Chris C, Robin Svensson, Jess Goldswain, Mark Lauber, Mark-André Richter, Russ Prentice, and of course Daniel Santos. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. And with that said, guys, have a great day.